Hey, this is the internet. You mean you want a place where you can ask somebody some technical questions about paint and bodywork and nobody jumps down your throat and tries to make you feel stupid? Guess what? You came to the right place. Let's go. Thank you for watching Paintucation by Kevin Tetz. My channel is not new, but it's a lot better here recently, and I owe a debt of gratitude to you guys for it growing and becoming a little bit more popular and getting better information on there. So I feel like I've been energized, and thank you for that. So I'm growing the channel. We're going to do a bunch of videos. Please tell your friends that there's great Q&A, great advice here, and some neat projects are coming up. Subscribe, like, ring the bell so you get the notifications so that you can tell when new content comes out, because we got a whole bunch of really great stuff planned. We're filming lots of things. I've got so much up here in the gourd stirring around, and it's going to come out the face hole, and we're going to do some stuff for you guys to watch, and hopefully I can pass on some information that I've collected over the years onto you guys and have some fun doing it. So like I said in the intro, this is a no drama zone. I will never beat up on somebody for asking a simple question, and it drives me nuts, honestly, on some of the other places on the web that people are literally intimidated to ask a simple question. No such thing as a stupid question. The only stupid question is the one that never gets asked. So, fire away. You guys have sent me dozens, if not hundreds, of questions. So thank you very much. We've got another raft of them for this answer session, and I'm trying to get better at this. So I'm trying to give more examples, not just sit here and flap. So you got something to look at because it is YouTube video, as well as something to listen to. And I do prep a little bit for this, so I'm not just answering these off the cuff, although some of them sound like that. But I do prep for this, and I've got some demos set out, hopefully to give a visual example of some of the answers that I'm giving, because I'm a visual learner. I find that a lot of people that do paint and body work are visual learners. So we're gonna go there. Speaking of visual learners, I need my glasses so I can learn visually and read visually. So today we're talking about, of course, fundamentals, because it's all fundamentals. Some paint basics. We're going to talk about fiberglass, sealers, what's the easiest system to start with, and some troubleshooting as well as some off-topic stuff. So we're going to start with this one right here. Hopefully I get your names right. This is at user 1K9VR8EJ5G. Is it true that 90% of a perfect paint job is all in prep and bodywork? I love this question because I happen to have a super great example over why the answer is yes. I always say that the paint job is the reward that we get for all the hard work we do underneath the actual paint job. It's the lens into the bodywork. And I'm going to give you an example of this. You know what this is? This is a paint job. In one of my trainings, I talk about adhesion, and we prepare a sample and do a paint job on top of it with zero preparation so that the paint job literally peels off in a sheet. So this is all you get, man. This is it. This is 3 coats of a single stage product. And of course, this is fully cured too. Of course it's going to reflect what's underneath it. So keep this in mind when you're thinking about, should I do that extra session of blocking? Should I put another layer of primer on there? I've got to sand through. Maybe I feel a little wow in the panel. Maybe there's a little dent in there. Maybe nobody will notice. This is it. This is your paint job. You can't do body work out of a spray gun. You can't body work clear coat. Now you can refine it, you can sand it flat and polish it, but if what's underneath it is not up to your standards, you don't have a really second chance in doing a paint job or doing body work with a paint job. So the answer is yes, it's true. 90% of a perfect paint job is all the prep and body work. So we're going to hang on to this because there's some other questions that this is the answer to. This is at Brian Deaton, 3550. For the first time painting a car, single stage or two stage? This is a great question. I've answered this question a bunch of different times. So here's the deal. When you're shooting a single stage paint, you prep the car, you mask it up, you're getting ready to shoot, you mix all your components in, it's single stage. It seems like it would be easier because when you shoot it, you do 2 coats or 3 coats and you're done. Here's the issue with that. If something goes terribly wrong, you don't have a chance to stop in the middle of the process. If you get bugs dragged into the paint, if you've got fish eyes, if you've got contamination, if you stop after 1 coat, your film is not thick enough to finish the paint job. It's not thick enough to repair. It's flirting with the fact that solvent can go underneath it. If you've got a hose scar, if your air hose flops into the side of the door and you stop after 1 coat, my point is this, something goes horribly wrong, you have to commit to finishing that paint job, letting it dry, stopping, assessing, and then figuring out your repair. Technically, there's less steps in a single stage paint job, so technically on a surface level, if everything goes perfectly, it might be simpler, I'm not going to say easier, to shoot a single stage paint job than a 2-stage paint job. But when I'm coaching somebody, when I'm recommending them a system to use for their first paint job, I will always, hands down, recommend a 2-stage paint job, as in a base coat, clear coat system. Here's why. Base coats are super easy to spray. Literally, they're easy to spray. They dry quickly, it's very thin, and you can, if something goes wrong, you could fix it right in the middle. You could do a coat, oh, you get a piece of dirt, or you get a bug that crawls in it, or even if you get a run, you could stop, let it flash off, sand it flat, and then keep going. And you can stop, assess, repair, and proceed at almost every stage of a 2-stage paint job, from your sealers all the way up to your clear coats. Within reason, your clear coats. Clear coat is kind of like a single stage, and once you pull the trigger, you got to commit to either the 2 or the 3 coats in the system. So for a beginner, the easiest system, because you have the luxury of time, is a base coat, clear coat system. Here's something else to think about. It takes an awful lot of time to prep a car for a paint job. If you're working on a weekend, if you start on Saturday morning and it takes 4 hours to mask and it takes a couple of hours to prep the car, get it ready, and then if it's a big vehicle, full-size pickup truck, you know, sometimes that can be several hours to actually spray it between your sealer, dry times, and all that stuff. So that's a long day. With a 2-stage paint job, you have the opportunity to prep, mask, put your color down, and then if that's the end of the day, then you can stop. And you can wait till the next day and come back and put your clear on. Most clear coat systems give you at least 12 hours to where you can safely put your clear coat layer on top of the color layer. So it gives you even more flexibility and even more time to where you can pick and choose your moments. So again, I'm going to recommend a 2-stage paint job for the very first time painter. At the Rebarn 500L, what do you think about the Eastwood roll-on primers and vinyl wraps? I think you might be talking about their Elasti wrap, their spray stuff, but vinyl, I'm a big fan of vinyl wraps. If you remember Project Satin, it was a 71 C10 truck that we used a custom paint job on and then did a wrap into Mr. Scary Face on the side. That's a cool effect. I like wraps. There's a place for everything in this industry, and a vinyl wrap serves a purpose, gives you a great opportunity for graphics if you have sponsors, things like that. So I don't hate wraps. It's the anti-paint job, and sometimes maybe you need an anti-paint job. Anyway, so let's go back to the Eastwood roll-on primer. Eastwood roll-on primer is interesting. One of my quotes, and you'll hear me say this over and over and over and over and over and over and over again, is that all we need to do as technicians is make the paint chemistry happy. That's our job. So Eastwood has figured out a system to where now you can do a roll-on system if you don't have pneumatic spray delivery, if you don't have a big enough air compressor. In the last question and answer thing that we did, we were talking a little bit about air compressors and size and CFM and requirements. Interesting option if you don't need a compressor at all. So here's a panel. All right, so this is a panel that's epoxied. It's a high build primer surfacer, and it's been sanded and prepped. And of course, I've treated it like a rented stepchild and thrown it down and it's scratched up here, but look how nice and shiny that is. So here's the start. We sand and we prep, and we do the work underneath the paint job. We spray the shiny stuff on, and guess what? We can have a nice paint job on top of a rolled on primer system. So this was, like I said, it was epoxy, and then a high build primer, and then I blocked it out. If you look around here, the dark, what you're seeing is guide coat, and then what you're seeing here is high and low spots. You're seeing also the texture of the roller. Eastwood has a very tight-napped roller that's going to give you some texture. But if you follow their instructions and pay attention to your flash times, and of course give it a lot of time to dry, it'll dry properly to where then you can block it out, flatten it out, and get it ready for your top coats. Now, I don't think they make a roll-on top coat, but I've seen guys do that on YouTube as well. So this, it's an interesting option. Is it something that I'm going to reach for all the time? No, it's not, because I'm set up here as a professional shop, and I've got all the compressors, I've got plenty of CFM, and I've got my guns. That's my comfort zone now. But if I'm first starting out, maybe this is something that I'm going to try. So it's not a bad option. It's an interesting option. Hope that answers that question. Okay, there's way too many consonants in this name, but it's at DHEUJSNRHFYDEHEHEHESHSHSHHDGGSD. I'm not kidding. That's his handle. So why do some paints drip and run and others don't? For me, it seems to be a price point, but is that the only reason? So it's literally a chemistry point. It's not a price point. Some paints are thinner than other paints, and they tend to run easier. Also, some paints dry faster and some paints dry slower. When you get up into more expensive systems, you have control over how fast they dry. You have control over the additives that you can put in, the speed of the reducer, the speed of the catalyst, and the way the coatings are applied. So I'm going to answer this question as gently as possible. It's not the paint that makes it drip, it's the painter, and it's the application process, combined with how you dial in your chemistry. So a little bit of a lesson here. When you're spraying anything, you want to be aware of three things before you even mix your paint. That's the temperature of the air around you, the temperature of your work surface that you're going to be spraying, and knowing if that temperature is going to change during the process of your project. Then you can figure out how to mix your components, and you're going to have a lot less tendency to run paint. Paint typically runs in cooler weather because it doesn't have a chance to collect. So hope that answers the question, but make sure that before you mix that you know what your temperatures are. At Ed Martin 5654. Hi, I picked up your channel from VGG. Again, Derek has been fantastic. He moved down the road from me probably almost a couple of years ago now. We've been kind of on each other's radar, and he's a hard guy to miss, so we kind of circled around a couple of times and figured out something that we could do together. So it's been really cool working with him. So thank you for all the referrals, Derek, and thanks for all you guys coming over from Vice-Grip Garage and finding Paintucation, and I'll do my best for you. I do have a question. I'm going to do the body work on my 02 Tacoma. My question is, I plan to bring this up to paint and primer and then outsource the paint job. However, what's the best way to protect my interior of my garage while I'm doing that, to protect against dust, primer, etc.? Great question. On the last answering session is what I'm going to call it, we talked about we're going to do a shop project where we kind of do a shop setup in a single car garage kind of thing. And the way I'm going to tell you to protect all your stuff is really inexpensive. These are just drop cloths. Go to your home center, your Lowe's, your Home Depot, your hardware store, get the cheapest drop cloths. You can get them, I don't know, I can't even remember the prices on them, but they're not very expensive. Line your toolboxes, cover everything with drop cloths. And I say plastic drop cloths more so than packing blankets or sheets or towels, because those things can contain lint. They'll hold dust in until they get an airflow over top of them. But right before you spray, if you cover everything down with drop cloths, they don't hold on to lint or particles that can rain back down into your work surface. Of course you want to cover your tools. Of course you want to cover your other equipment. If you've got a set of golf clubs in the corner and you're painting in your garage, drop cloths are going to be your friend, and you're going to be able to not only protect everything around you, but also control that environment. Like I said, we have to control our environment. It's our job as technicians to do that. Gravity still works. At bs.wickman, scenario. You're doing body work on a vehicle inside the shop. Let's say it's 72 degrees and 25% humidity in the shop. That's really nice conditions to paint. So you push the vehicle outside where the temperature is either plus or minus 20 degrees and a lot higher humidity. Does the temperature humidity change or affect whatever materials that is on the vehicle? Yes, it does. I'm going to give you a scenario. When you dial in your chemistry, I was just talking about this, when you figure out your spray environment, when you're going to apply any wet coating or even body filler, which is actually technically a wet coating, you want to figure out what your metal temperature is, what your air temperature is, and also what it's going to be. Then you can mix with an educated or a informed mindset and strategy. So if you're 72 degrees inside your shop and you put your coatings on, and then you roll the project outside, well, the chemistry that you've dialed in is now inaccurate. Especially in the scenario to where if you're in an enclosed environment and you're out of the sun, you mix your chemicals and then you roll it outside to dry in the sun. Well, in the afternoon sun here where I'm at in Tennessee, it can get easily 140, 150 degrees metal temp out there in the sun if it's a darker color. And if I've sprayed with 80-degree chemistry, it's going to do the wrong thing to that chemistry. We have to allow paint to dry and cure properly, and you're going to interfere with that process. Now, if you're nice and warm inside your shop and it's super cold outside, keep this in mind. Paint absolutely shuts down below 50 degrees. Below 60 degrees, you're flirting with the window of it not drying properly. So what happens, and I'll be brief with this, but what happens when you add a hardener to paint, you've got a window in which that hardener can activate and cross-link. Think about a 9-volt battery. You've got a battery life and then it tapers off. That's what a catalyst does in your paint. That's why we have different temperature ratings. So if it's 70 degrees, we want a 70 to 80 degree catalyst. We have to match that 9-volt battery to the way it's going to taper off. We want it to cross-link and become something else within that window. So if we paint in 72 degrees and roll it outside in 55 degrees, you're going to stretch that window out, and there's a really good chance that it's not going to outgas and cross-link within that window, and you're going to have problems. It can be soft, it can lift up, when you put an X coating on it, because it's not fully cross-linked and solvents can dive and do all kinds of crazy things. So be aware that when you change the conditions of the drying of your chemistry, you can cause yourself problems. It's always best to read your TDS sheet, your technical data sheet, and find out what your dry times are. Typically, I don't move a vehicle out of my direct spray environment until I'm past my either untaping time, your touch times, or your polish times. I like to let it sit there and do its thing, do its chemistry thing before I move it around, so be careful. At Lobo 479, bare metal sitting for a few months, light rust. How do you condition metal for primer? So there's a couple of different ways. You can grind the rust off with sandpaper or Rolock discs or fiber wheels and then go at it again. Or, here's an idea, how about before we let it sit and flash rust, we do a metal treatment on it. There's a really good metal treatment that I want to talk about. It's interesting. Pickle X20. Now, I don't get paid a dime for this, and I wish I did, because I recommend this to a lot of people. This is a one-step metal prep. This was developed for the aerospace industry in Alabama to stave off corrosion on aircraft equipment. What this is it's a metal prep, it's a phosphatizing coating that you wipe on top of bare metal substrate, ferrous substrate that will rust. And, well, maybe aluminum too. Anyway, what it does is it creates a barrier between atmosphere and substrate, substrate being the material that's going to rust. Atmosphere is atmosphere. So what you do is you apply this, you wipe off the excess, and you let it sit. It puts a barrier coating between your metal and the atmosphere. You can leave this indefinitely and it will not flash rust as long as you don't introduce rain or excessive humidity to it. You can even set it outside and it's going to degrade after a little while and it'll eventually flash through. But inside, it's an indefinite period of time that you can leave it and it won't flash rust. That's set. And so it's a really good pre-treatment. It also acts as an anti-spatter for welding. This is a good treatment. Now, I want to talk about PPE. It's a mild acid with a phosphatizer. So it's chemistry. It's a chemical. You want to wear gloves. You want to wear safety glasses because this stuff, it's a mild acid. You don't want to splash it onto your skin or into your eyes, certainly. So be careful when you use something like this. There's several other brands out here that have the similar type of a phosphatized coating, but this is the one that I gravitate to because it just works very well for me. Here's the other thing, too. If you leave, I'll set that right there, lap around the chair. If you leave, I just rhymed, the coating without a metal prep on it, and it does flash rust, what I'm going to do in that instance is I'm going to take my Picklex, of course with gloved hands, and a Scotch-Brite pad, and I'm going to scrub the rust off. Because it's a mild acid, it'll get rid of that flash rust, and it also doubles the purpose of a phosphatizing coating if there's any rust that I missed. So I hope that answers your question. This coating is actually really good. I've got a friend that's got a custom shop, and he calls it pickling. He pickles everything before he puts coating on it. And he gets a very, very tight bond between an epoxy primer and a steel substrate using the Picklex product. So hopefully that answers your question. Okay. At Brandy Boohoo 9172. I kind of like that. Hey feller, if you're painting metal black, is it better to use black primer or is gray okay? So here's the answer. If I'm in a collision environment, I want to get as close to the top coat color as possible. That way I don't have to hammer on a whole bunch of color coats to get up to my main color and get color strength where I can do my blending after that. So it's probably not a bad idea to use a similar colored sealer or primer to your top coat. However, black is such a high strength color that it's typically going to get full hiding full saturation in one single coat, and then your second coat is usually the money shot, and then you can clear coat. So black is a different thing. The reason black covers so well is because it's got a super high concentration of carbon in the actual pigment, and it just covers very well. You guys that have sprayed black, you know this. Here's my thought. When I shot Project Z Sled, I used a black epoxy, a black 2K primer surfacer, and then black base coat, and then clear coat. The reason I use black in my undercoats is because I planned on driving the heck out of that car and getting cone scars. And I drove it to Indianapolis and met up with Power Tour. Come back. I know I'm going to get rock chips. If I have a light gray primer underneath my black top coat, if I get rock chips, which I hope I do, I hope that these aren't just museum pieces that you guys are building. I hope that you get rock chips and you scar them up. And if you do, you're going to see that gray primer through the rock chip. If you have a black primer, you're going to see that less. You're going to be less prone to see your rock chips and your damage underneath your top coats. So my recommendation is to go, even if you're spraying black, use at least a black sealer underneath it. If you can get black primer surfacers, which you can, lots of different manufacturers have them, I'd kind of stay with black if I'm doing that. All right. Two-tone strategy. This is interesting to me. So this plays into base coat, clear coat, the M&M shell that I like to talk about, and the strategy. It sounds kind of nerdy thinking you have to have a paint strategy, but truly you have to pre-plan. You have to have a strategy for your paint job. So strategy. Here's a question. At John Allen, 1985. I would love to do a two-tone paint scheme on my 2018 Silverado 1500 and do a modern Big 10. That would be a cool truck. Now, if you remember way back when the square body trucks were hot, they had a Big 10 series truck and it had a cool graphic on the side. So that'd be a neat truck, and send pictures if you do it. I want to do a modern Big 10. Right now it's all black. The second color I want is bright red. What would be the best way to go about doing that? And I'm going to read the second question because this answer is going to cover both of these questions. This is at Just Buggin in 67. At Just Buggin 67. Sorry, I'm butchering your names. What is your method of painting a two-tone truck? Mine is similar to Derek's, but it has red on top and Wimbledon white on the bottom. Thanks for the content. And Fotina, you betcha. Did I mention I've got a book on Fotina? I think I did. Oh, also there's a streaming program that's very inexpensive on Paintucation.com for Fotina. So let's talk about two-tone. So this is a two-tone fender. We've got a lighter tone here, and the dominant color is red. So the way we're going to do this, we're going to spray both colors in base coat, most times, and then clear coat the entire panel at the same time. That's a typical two-tone or three-tone or multi-panel graphics strategy. The beauty of base clear is you have a strength layer over top, and the beauty of base coat is that it dries extremely fast. So you can do one color. You're going to have about 5 to 10 minutes flash time between coats. Within 20 minutes after applying your last color, now you've got what's called a tape time. And you can apply masking tape to it, divide off the color, and then apply your next color, and it's not going to mar, it's not going to show through the clear coat. So that's another one of the beauties of two-stage finishes, is because you can go really fast. It's designed for cycle time, for a diminished cycle time in collision repair. So the way I was taught, and the way that works best for me, is to always do your smallest color first. If you've got an insert in, okay, so I had a 79 F-150 years and years ago, and it was red on the top and the bottom, and with a Wimbledon white insert in the middle. I'm always going to do my smallest color first. So I'm going to spray my Wimbledon white in the middle, and then I'm going to mask it off, cover it up completely, and then spray the biggest color. And then I'm going to unmask that and clear coat everything together. So in this fender, what I did was to spray the smallest color first, up to here. let that flash and dry, and then I'm going to come back and mask off my white color and then spray the red color. So here's a tip also. When you're spraying your smallest color first, don't mask this off. Let the color blow past. That way you only have to mask the color once, and you're not building up an edge here right on your dividing line. So if I was to mask this off and spray up to there, I'm going to have a big ridge that I'm either going to have to knock down, or it's going to show through my clear. So always blow past where your dividing line is, because you got to figure out where that is, and then you can come back and do a nice crisp line with a fine line tape, and then spray your other color, and then you're ready to put the clear coat on and finish the paint job. So I think that answers both of those questions and gives you a little bit of insight into how I strategize when I'm doing a two-tone or a three-tone paint job. So that lesson taught me how to do custom paint jobs. It taught me how to do flame jobs. It taught me how to do multiple different graphics. It's the same principle. Once you can grok and once you can do a two-tone paint job, it's the same thing for a very elaborate multicolored custom paint job. It's no different. Once you obey those rules, once you understand the strategy of a two-tone paint job, your world literally is the same if you want to do a 17-color flame job. Or if you've ever seen the West Coast lowrider vehicles with all the layering, all the candies, all that stuff, it's the same principle. You're doing one coating layer, letting it dry and flash, and masking and doing another coating layer. Sometimes there's intercoats in between. It's the same rule, whether it's 15 layers deep or 15 colors wide or 2. You're welcome. Okay, metal repair and PBAs, bodywork. I've heard that some people, this is at Gerald Brown 8711. This is a good question. I've heard that some people are using some type of glue instead of welding body panels in place. Is this true? Is it any better than welding? What are the pros and cons? So this is a great question. Back when I was doing collision repair years ago, we were starting to use PBAs, panel bond adhesives. There's a lot of high-end cars that use bonding adhesives. Bullet trains in Asia bonded together. Open road trucks bonded together. Aircraft sometimes is bonded together. I watched the show, it's called How It's Made, and there was a McLaren factory tour, and they were showing a McLaren with an aluminum space frame, a combination of rivets and bonding materials. Bonding is nothing new. Bonding is a really interesting way to adhere panels when you maybe can't weld them or don't want to weld them. So I'm going to show you a typical bonding adhesive. This is an applicator gun. It's designed for this dual cartridge system here. This is a door skin and SMC adhesive. So this is a bonding adhesive for fiberglass or for metal substrate door skins. There's an intermix tip, and you can see the voids in the intermix tip. In theory, when you pull the trigger, by the time everything goes down in here, does its happy dance and comes out the tip, it's thoroughly intermixed. There's a little bit of prep, and I've got some videos that you can look at showing you exactly how to use this. And making a mess on my hands. Wear gloves when you do this. I didn't know that was leaky. Anyway, 2 parts. It's like an epoxy. This is equal parts. When these parts combine, it becomes this incredibly strong adhesive. So it's really, really strong. Upwards, depending on the panel bond that you use, can be upwards of 22 to 2600 psi tensile strength. Tensile strength is the amount of effort it takes to tear it apart. Most times with a panel bond, the metal will tear before the adhesive tears. Very effective adhesive. So is it better? It depends what the purpose is. for bonding a bedside on a pickup truck. If you have to do rosette welds and plug welds in the perimeter of a pickup truck, that's a lot of welds, it's a lot of weld prep. Most importantly, it's a lot of opportunity from the backside for corrosion to initiate, for corrosion to start. The best reason for using a panel bond is to control corrosion because you're putting a panel on. So typically on a bedside or a roof skin, I'm going to bond it, I'm going to let it sit, and SOP and most factory mandates are going to say that you have to do a tack weld in the corners to hold it still, to make sure that if in the event of a collision it doesn't peel up from a corner. So all data, all your OEs will have a procedure, standard operating procedure recommending different things like this. For a small panel, a non-structural panel, no, you don't need to tack the inside edges. I've got videos, and I've done it on TV shows, where we use a panel bond to do a rust patch replacement, a welderless rust patch replacement. And it's a really effective way of doing that. And it's very, very strong. Like I said, around 2,000 PSI tensile strength that's going to hold your panel bond in place. Here's the other thing that's really interesting about panel bonds, and what was kind of a game changer for me and really got my ears peaked and perked up when I first started learning about this technology. If you try and MIG weld an aluminum panel to a steel frame, it can't happen. It's a non-ferrous metal. You can't MIG weld. You have to TIG weld aluminum, right? You have to have DC current. And yeah, anyway, you can't meld those dissimilar substrates together, but you can glue them together. So the PBA, the panel bond, doesn't care if it's aluminum or fiberglass or metal. As long as you've properly prepped the surfaces, you can bond dissimilar substrates, and that's the 49-cent word for it. So it becomes a very versatile tool really quickly when you want to do custom stuff. Maybe you've got a carbon fiber wide body kit that you want to put on a little car or something like that, motorcycle parts. Panel bonds are really good for modern Corvettes, SMC, even the door skins on, I'm thinking about a 94, 95 Firebird. Those are composite door skins. And the panel bond is a great product for that. Is it better than welding? It's better than welding because you don't have any corrosion if you prep it properly on the back sides of the panels. Sometimes in a large panel, you have to use welding at the same time. So is it a complete substitute for welding? I'm going to say no, but it's faster and it's more effective at staving off corrosion in between the sandwich bond of those panels. You can't use a panel bond, well, you can. You shouldn't use a panel bond for a structural repair either. You always want to either use a rivet and a panel bond, or weld those structural components together. I'm thinking about a frame rail. I'm thinking about a balloon assembly on the front of a Fox body Mustang if you got to put a side piece in, something like that. Structural components, not the greatest thing. You got to use a combination, but panel bond is a really, really great way to do repairs, and you don't need to know how to weld. So, can you describe when you should use dolly on or dolly off a hammer? Also, a little bit on slap files. I'm going to go get some hammers. And just like that, through the magic of TV, which is not really TV, it's YouTube, I now have those things that I was supposed to have in on a benchtop format. So the question is, when should you use hammer on or hammer off dolly techniques? So before I even start this, I'm going to talk about PPE. I want gloves with a little bit of cushion in the fingertips, and I want ear protection. I'm not going to be smacking metal around, but think about PPE, guys. I know guys that are wearing hearing aids because they didn't protect their hearing in the shop. It's a real thing, and I'm not going to beat you up over that stuff, but it's something to consider. Take care of your hands. When you're doing a hammer action on a panel, it's typically to repair it, to move metal back into the shape that it was once stamped in, or to move a piece of flat stock into a new shape that you want to reestablish, or that you want to establish, i.e. a custom panel. So the reason that you're going to use a hammer in the first place is to beat on and to move the panel. There's different ways of asking the metal to move. Hammer on dolly is literally this. Take a closer look. I'll show you. All right here. So hammer on dolly is when it's just like this with a piece of metal in between. Hammer on dolly, bam, like that. Hammer off dolly is when I'm using the dolly and the hammer as a lever. I'll explain. If you look at this piece of metal, you can see that it's domed. It's not flat. It used to be flat, but when I take this piece of metal and I strike blows on it, it does what's called peening. It literally squishes the metal. It makes it thinner. Now what that does is it pushes energy from the center where you're hammering outward. That's why it curves it. It pinches it in the center and it pushes away just like a little kid kicking off the covers in the middle of the night. And it actually stores that tension that you're now putting in it and creates a dome or a change in the panel. It makes it thinner here and pushes the energy this way, creates a dome. So the reason I would want to hammer on dolly like this would be to correct a dent. If I've got a dent in the middle of a panel, I want to hammer on dolly and try and push that metal back into the crevice or move it around. Now, when I want to hammer off dolly, I want to use my dolly as a lever. When I don't want to change this surface, but I want to move it around, I don't want to pinch it, I don't want to cause distortion in it, I just want to move it around, I'm going to hammer off dolly. Dolly's here, hammering off dolly. What that's going to do, and you can literally see what I'm doing, I've just changed the shape of it without peening it, without doming it. So that would be an instance to where I would use hammer off dolly. It's kind of up to you to decide when you want to do hammer on or hammer off. Typically, any kind of a body repair is a combination of both. If I just want to correct a large piece of metal, I'll hammer off dolly, I'll move it around. And typically, I'm going to support with my hand on the back side of it, push up and hammer off dolly. So it's a kind of it's a lever action, but it's a dual-sided lever action. So practice. Practice. Put a piece of metal in a bench vise, practice hammer on, practice hammer off, get a fender like the fenders that I've got on stands. You can get them super cheap. You can get them for 20, 30 bucks at Pull Apart, and practice. See what works for you. Go to the point of no return to where you've got a super paper thin piece of metal and see what happens, and go too far. Practice is key. Practice is key. The other part of the question is a slapping file. What do you use a slapping file for? So here's the difference here. This hammer, it's a medium crowned hammer. This is my favorite body hammer because of the shapes in it. This is the one you can tell it's had a few miles put on it. This is a Martin hammer, and it's got a fairly aggressive crown. It's going to move metal fairly quickly. I've got a nice wedge end here. This is a big flat area. This is a slapping spoon. I can use this spoon either to pry, or as you can see here, it's had 1 or 2 hammer blows put on it. This, I can either slap like this and move a larger, the impact zone, if you will, is larger, and it's going to distribute that energy over a wider area. The other thing I can do with this slapping hammer is the slapping spoon, is I can hammer like this, and I can control the motion or the movement of a larger piece of metal and deflect or diffuse the energy so I don't have that high crown impact point that's going to stretch and peen. It just helps me move it around a little bit. So I hope that answers your question, and in my mind it does. But again, practice is key. There's a couple of really good books. There's one that you can get on Amazon. It's called The Key to Metal Bumping. I don't have it in front of me right now, but it's a little red book. It is literally a really, really great resource. So combine that, get a tool set, and then practice. I'm going to move this over here right now. Mother of God, I've lost my glasses again. How do I do that? I don't know where they went. All right, I'm going to try and I'm going to try and read without them. At JC-GY4XS. Will you please cover the easiest way to repaint factory truck steel wheels? Oh, no, we've done this one. Okay. Sandblast, epoxy, top coat. You're welcome. Ooh, here's a good question. At K.G. Kennedy 9471. Many people ask me, okay, here's a question many people ask me. So this guy is probably, maybe he's got a home shop, he's a technician. Should bare metal always have a sealer to be able to paint a car or truck? When you read your TDS sheets, technical data sheets, on your paint products, you will see a listing of compatible products. Never, ever, ever will you see almost never will you see a top coat that is direct to metal application. Doesn't exist in collision repair. You always want to seal your bare metal. Even your EDP coatings, your black electrodeposition primer coatings, you never want to go straight to base on those EDP coatings. You always want to have a sealer. You want to have that layer of adhesion between your substrate and your top coats. All right, here's one from at Buford's. Is self-etching primer the best over bare metal and Bondo? You got to be careful with self-etching primer. It's an acid etch. Epoxy is a different composition. It's a different chemistry than self-etching primer. If you use a self-etching primer, you cannot use polyester products over top of it. It's incompatible. So I have an example of this. Hang tight. And I found some other glasses too. Okay. So this right here is an example of terrible adhesion. So there's two types of adhesion. There's mechanical and chemical. You have to have one or the other in order for your coatings to stick. If you have neither, you end up with this. Delamination. So this right here was an experiment. This is a self-etching primer. It is a one-coat layer. It's an acid etch primer. And this is a high-build polyester primer filler. 2 or 3 coats of this stuff. So this is how I became intimate with the fact that all right, so that glitch was a part of our technically dazzling presentation where the camera just decided to shut itself off because the memory card was full. So here we are. And I found my other glasses too. So what I was saying is that this is an example of zero adhesion. I used an acid etch primer and a super high build polyester primer filler, and the acid etch, if this is a urethane primer, would have bonded and would have stuck. It didn't stick because polyester is incompatible with acid. They don't jihad, they don't like each other. Bad idea. So, acid etch primer is old technology. Almost never in a modern collision repair setup designed for efficiency and maximum adhesion, best coatings, all that type of stuff, almost never will you see an acid etch product sandwiched in between other ones. We've gotten past that in collision repair, and it's an old technology. There's better technology. I would highly recommend that you put that stuff away and go to an epoxy coating, which is much more compatible with everything. Epoxy is the great equalizer. It sticks to everything, everything sticks to it. It doesn't matter what you're epoxying. It could be bone, it could be rock, it could be wood, it could be steel, it could be aluminum, it could be fiberglass, it could be carbon fiber. You put a coating of epoxy on that, and then whatever top coat you want goes on top of that epoxy. The great equalizer. Think about it that way. Lean towards not using acid etch primer anymore. And yeah, okay. All right, next question. At Treyhine4578, this is so clear now. I hear a lot on you must do epoxy prime before bodywork. Is this true? Not necessarily. The reason I like to epoxy before bodywork is typically my projects are long-term. If I'm doing a custom car, I'm going to go ahead and have it media blasted. Is body filler compatible to bare steel? Well, sure it is. Is it best to wipe a whole car with body filler? A lot of guys do. I know a lot of high-end custom guys do. Here's the catch. Metal oxidizes really quickly. So when I'm doing a vehicle, I'm going to media blast the vehicle. If it's a custom job, I'm going to media blast the vehicle. I'm going to get it under epoxy as fast as I can. That way I'm stopping flash rusting from happening, and then I can body work one panel at a time, and that's how I recommend you guys do it as well. So if you media blast a vehicle, you set it off in the corner and you body work, and then maybe the next weekend you get to the door, and then the next weekend you get to the fender, and then the next weekend you get to the other side. If it's just a couple of dents, you're allowing the opportunity for the metal to rust, and then you can cover it up with body filler. That's the real sin, is covering up rust with body filler. That's when you have crazy problems. So just be aware of that. That's the reason I will use an epoxy in my shop underneath body filler. It just gives me that comfort knowing that I've covered the metal and it's not going to rust while I'm doing my extensive body process. I'm making a mess over here, and we're going to do this. All right, so do the insides of AMD panels need to be top coated? AMD panels have an electrodeposition primer. Almost every reproduction panel has an EDP coating, electrodeposition primer. It's an electrostatically applied primer that gets really tight into the pores of the metal. It's a really great coating. A lot of guys say grind it off and then start your body work. You can't trust it. Well, if you test it with lacquer thinner and it doesn't move off, then you're probably good to go. So AMD uses a very good composition of EDP coatings. A lot of different manufacturers do as well. Your OEs, there's an E-coat that is really, really rock solid. So does it need top coat? Well, if it's going to be exposed to impact damage from tires, yes. It does. It needs some sort of an undercoat or some sort of a top coat to protect it. Typically, you've got a splash shield or some sort of a liner in between your fender. You may not need an EDP coating there. If the panel is ever exposed to atmosphere and sun, nobody's EDP coating has any UV strength. The UV inhibitors that are in paints and top coats are not in the electrodeposition primers. So if it's ever going to be exposed to the sun, yes, you need a top coat. So for chip resistance, for impact resistance, and for resistance to UV damage, yes, you need to top coat your EDP panels. If you're doing a high-end custom, what if somebody crawls under there? What if somebody you prop it up at a car show? You want that backside to be super shiny. Maybe that would be a reason to top coat the backsides of your panels also. So this brings a point of corrosion control. I want to show you something, and this is really interesting. If you're ever in the scenario to where you're doing a rocker panel, sometimes rocker panels or patch panels for structural parts don't have an EDP coating. When you're welding them in, you're going to grind the E-coat off so you have a good closed circuit and a good weld bond where you have a nice heat affected zone and a weld pool. Even if you're doing resistance welding, spot welding, you want to make sure that your pickup points don't have that coating on. So you're always going to have bare metal on the backside. So this is something that's very common in collision repair, in which to restore the integrity, is the fancy word, of the factory corrosion control. The E-coat on the backsides of panels, seam sealer in between two pinched panels. When we're doing aftermarket repair work, sometimes we rob the properties and we can actually introduce flash rusting. So here's a way to get around. This is called cavity wax. So when I'm doing a restoration, I'm going to use a cavity wax inside my rocker panels, or inside my frame rails, or even inside door skins or quarter panels where there's a blind panel. And what that means is that I can't get access to the blind panel to spray on a coating. So this is cavity wax. There's several different brands of them. This one is by KBS. You've got a straw, and you've got this funky, crazy applicator here. So this thing has an emitter tip. There's several different pin-sized openings on this tip to where when it sprays through, it sprays outward. So the idea is if I'm putting a rocker panel on or skinning a quarter panel, I can't get down in that wheel arch, but I still want to have some corrosion resistance there as much as I possibly can, because maybe it's a valuable car, or maybe I just want to offer a warranty with it. Maybe I just want it to last for the next 50 years for the next guy. So this tip, we're going to pretend this is a rocker panel, and this tip, you spray this as you're pulling it out. And that way it coats everything on the inside of that blind panel. And it's kind of fun to watch, so we're going to do it. Because if we can't play and have fun, what's the point of any of this stuff, right? I've already set myself up to become kind of a cartoon here because I don't have a big enough table. All right, can you see that? Visualize this being a rocker panel, and I'm coating the inside. All right, so you see how that coats as I'm pulling it out? So that cavity wax, as that stuff dries, it's going to coat all of the internal structure of that. And it's liquid, so it's going to go down inside pinch welds. It's going to surround rosette welds or spot welds, and it's going to be a very effective coating. It's going to be the best I can do inside a blind panel if I've done a panel replacement. Another question, what do you treat the insides of doors and fenders with on your projects? Cavity wax. Best way to clean off rust off paint to protect it from returning. Surface rust on the hood, Pickle X20. I have new fenders for my 72 F250. They're coated in EDP. What should I paint them with? What kind of primer and what kind of top coat? Scuff it with a red pad. Use a sealer. Don't go straight to color on your EDP coatings. Use a sealer that's compatible with your top coat. And then, if you want to do single stage or if you want to do base clear, that's your option. Scuff with a red pad. Do a sealer coat, always on EDP, and then your top coats. A lot of the vintage vehicles had a satin flat, especially Fords, had a satin black. Fords, the vintage Fords in the 60s had as many as 3 or 4 different sheens of flat on there's some moaning vehicle next door. There's as many as 3 or 4 different sheens of flat black on the original vehicles in the mid-60s, and so it's kind of up to you for the rest of that. All right, so here's a question about fiberglass. How do I fix a tennis ball sized hole with no access behind it? You ask, I deliver. So, I actually have a patch panel here I had manufactured for training. I've got a video called Fiberglass Repair, and it's about repairing fiberglass. And I had this made to show different things. Mold seam lines, how to prep them. How to do a two-sided repair on a corner. Idiosyncrasies with fiberglass, expansion and contraction rates. And actually there's a project on a mid-80s Corvette door that we show. And so, what I have done for you, my friend, is actually literally cut a tennis ball size hole in my patch panel. That's how much I care. And I've cut it out with a hole saw, and I'm going to walk you through the process of how to fix a hole like this without having access to the back side. So here is my patch. I want you to notice something on this patch. So we're going to refocus right up close here. What I've done on the top of my patch is bevel it. It's not straight, it's a beveled edge. Think about that for a second, and I'll get back to that. I don't have a beveled edge on here, and I want to show you I want to show you why we would, and I've got a little diagram. I want to show you why we would bevel that edge. So the first thing I'm going to do is create what's called a backing strip. Backing strips are very common in collision repair. If I'm replacing a full quarter panel and I can't get underneath where that overlapped weld is between the roof skin and the quarter panel, I can do a subsection or a splice further down the panel. I'm going to put a backing panel behind it, and it gives my new panel something to sit on. What you're going to do on this is create a backing panel in here. So right here is my little cross-section diagram of my backing panel. You can see here's my fiberglass, and I've got an overlapped backing panel. Pay attention to the distance here. As much as you want on the outside, you have it have an equal part on the inside. You need at least 3/4 of an inch for your adhesive to hold that backing panel on, or your fiberglass resin, or your bonding adhesive from Corvette Central, or wherever you're going to get it. So this is kind of a sort of a rude example of how to do this. If I'm doing this in the shop, I'm going to do a much better job. Here's my backing panel. These are my pliers. I'm going to put the backing panel in here, clamp it in place, do one on the other side, create a shelf for my patch to sit on, right? It's fairly straightforward. That's where these little vice grips come in handy. I might have to do one side at a time, but I'm going to bond my backing strip to this side, let it cure or let it set. I'm going to bond it to the other side and create my shelf, create my backing strip to where I can then do a second procedure and drop my patch in on top of that. It's going to take a little bit. It's not a one-step thing. Fiberglass is almost always a two-step repair. This is in fact a three-step repair. Step one is putting your backing strips in place. You always want to prep with at least 50 grit. I use 24 grit on fiberglass. So even though I don't have access to the whole entire backside of the panel, I can curl some sandpaper around and I can prep the heck out of that backside with my 24 grit. You want to have mechanical bond. You have to have tooth for the adhesives. Now it's an old school fiberglass adhesive that I've used before, but my favorite thing is the panel bonds, like that SMC composite. That's what I would use on here. And I would prep this side, I would prep the back side, I would put it in here, clamp it, leave it, let it sit and cure. Go around, get my shelf, get my backing strip on all the sides, and then now I have a surface here. I'm going to prep this with 24 grit, I'm going to prep this with 24 grit, and now I'm ready to bond this in place here. It's your choice whether you want to use fiberglass resin and matting or fiberglass reinforced filler. But when you're bonding something to another place, I would either use the SMC or the fiberglass bond. That's what you want to do there. Now let's talk about the bevel that I've got here. So hope you've caught up with me so far, because my brain is going 900 miles an hour, and I beveled my patch. I have not beveled this. It's a super good idea to bevel your patch. The same way, if you're patching metal, you want to bevel the metal, either whether to fill it up with a weld, or the biggest reason that you want to bevel that out is because if I do a flush repair on here, the next step after I bonded my patch into my backing strip is I'm going to use a short strand fiberglass filler and level it out. Once I level that fiberglass out, now I can come back and do the rest of the repair, which is going to end up in primer blocking and then painting. So this is gel coat. We're going to talk about that in a second too as a final step. If I leave that hard shoulder, because of the nature of fiberglass and how it expands and contracts during temperature cycles, that edge is going to map through. And unless I diminish it with a bevel and then body work over top of it, kind of create a low space so that I can then fill, that edge is going to show through. Trust me, I've done this the wrong way so many times, and you need to bevel both sides. Now I'm going to come back in with my short strand fiberglass filler, body work that flat. And then, before I do priming and blocking, I'm going to apply gel coat. You can get gel coat anywhere. I get it from marine supply places. Guys do boat repairs every day. Gel coat is a very common repair process in Corvette restoration and reconstruction. What I like about gel coat is that it puts this M&M shell back on the fiberglass. If I don't put a gel coat on, my primer is never going to be quite as hard. It's going to be a different hardness, a different durometer than the gel coat that's already on here. This is gel coat. It's just the way fiberglass is made. So we want to put that back. We want to restore the integrity of that shell, of that gel coat. So gel coat over top of my fiberglass patch, let that cure. Then I'm going to block it out, and then I'm going to start off with my traditional body shop coatings, an epoxy, the high build primer surfacer, and then finally block and paint. So make sure that when you're doing a fiberglass repair, you finish the fiberglass repair and don't start with your wet coatings too soon. Backing strip, plug, short strand fiberglass, body work it out, gel coat, then you can start off with your conventional repair stuff. You don't want that edge mapping through because fiberglass, it will absolutely show itself. Here's the other thing. If I've got a larger panel in this, I'm going to have several different pairs of pliers. Preset the tension on your pliers. Don't wait until your adhesives are wet and you're goofing around here trying to figure out, because look at that. I mean, preset the tension on your locking pliers and prep for the repair. That's the last tip I'm going to say about fiberglass right here. I'm going to get this guy out of the way. Fiberglass is a great repair material. The reason fiberglass is popular in vehicle construction is because it's light, it's relatively strong, and it's very inexpensive to manufacture and repair. That's the reason that Corvettes are made out of fiberglass. When the engineers proposed the Corvette project, GM didn't back it. They didn't believe in it. They didn't think that a European-influenced two-seat roadster was going to be very popular in 1952 when this concept first came up. So literally GM said, sure, Skunk Works guys, go ahead and build it. Well, we don't believe in it. We're not going to give you funding for stamped sheet metal. Go ahead and build it out of fiberglass. Make it cheap, and then we'll prove concept. And Corvette, hello, you know, concept was proven. But because the car started off with fiberglass, it became a really good idea because it was lightweight and easy to manufacture. It just stuck. So now it's a different type of fiberglass. It's an SMC, but there you go. There's a little bit of history lesson on Corvette. Okay, flat clear. Satin paint jobs. It's kind of a cool thing. It's an extremely difficult thing to get a perfect flat paint job. I'm going to talk a little bit about it. This is from @CarsArePeople2 4835. Yes, they are. They certainly have personalities. Ask me about the Rocket Miata, aka Miss Charlie. That car has a personality, and there's a presence in that car. I'm wanting to spray my Factory 5 Roadster in matte clear. That's going to be cool. Do you have any advice for that? I'm worried about dust nibs. He's got an inflatable booth. Since you can't really sand or polish that kind of finish. Incorrect. You can't sand at all or polish that finish. Once you spray, that's it. That's how it's going to look. So, Factory 5 Roadster is fiberglass. Fiberglass is really prone to static. So, the recipe for stuff happening that you don't want to happen, you're kind of setting yourself up. You've got an inflatable paint booth, you've got a fiberglass car that's prone to static, and you've got a material that you can't repair. So do your diligence for sure. Super clean the inside of that spray booth. If you've got an anti-static gun, use that on the surface. If you don't have an anti-static gun, before you paint, use an alcohol pre-wipe. It does a nice job of eliminating or reducing static cling on the surface. But my recommendation, I have one in my shop now, is an anti-static gun, an ionizing gun that completely eliminates static charge on the surface. So they're kind of expensive. Some places rent them. Look online. The ones that I use are from Static Solutions. If you can borrow one from somebody, it's a great piece of gear. That's going to help you a lot. Make sure that you've got a super clean surface. That said, matte clear. What happens in a matte clear is that it's what's called a platelet layer. What keeps it flat is a layer that floats to the top during the cure cycle when the resins are outgassing, and it forms a matte film. It's literally like a layer of diffusion on top of the clear coat resin. So it's up to us to try and control the way that raises up and dries and sheens evenly. If it's 80 degrees and you're using a 70-degree reducer, you're going to arrest that process and you might get streaking. Use a little bit hotter of a reducer than your temperature. I recommend 10 to 15 degrees above your ambient and surface temperature. So if it's 85 degrees, use a 95 or 100 degree flat clear hardener or a reducer. Best to paint in cooler conditions so you have that sealing to where you can use a slowed down chemistry to let that process happen and even out on top. Technique matters a lot. Make sure your technique is very consistent, 6 inches off the surface, and very, very even and consistent, 75% overlap on your technique. Super important. Practice on something, because that Factory 5 car, there's so many different complex shapes on that car. It's not like a big dang box. It's going to be difficult to spray, so you got your work cut out for you. Here's the other thing that I've learned about satin clears. Typically, I spray clear coat with a 1.2 or a 1.3 fluid tip. It's best to use a little bit larger, 1.4 fluid tip on satin clears, excuse me, because that droplet size is an enclosed chemistry lesson in itself. Those droplets with a larger fluid tip are going to be larger, and it's going to allow that chemical process of the platelets to rise up on a droplet level a little bit easier. It's going to help you with that process. So in a nutshell, make sure that you can do all you can to eliminate static. Make sure your inflatable booth is super clean. Above all, control your temperature. Make sure that you are staying 10 to 15 degrees above your surface temperature and your air temperature for the duration of the paint job, and really control what you can control. One more thing about flat clear is that if I'm doing a high-end custom, if I'm doing a very expensive paint job and I want that sucker perfect, what I'm going to do is go through my process. I'm going to paint it with shiny clear first. I'm going to get all of that stuff done. Then what I'm going to do is sand it with 600 or 800 and super clean it again, so that all I have to worry about is a distribution layer of that clear. I don't have to worry about 2 coats. I don't have to worry about 3 coats. Now I can do either a final single coat or maybe 2 coats of my flat clear. All the work is done. Here's the other thing that happens when you're painting clear coat over top of prepped 800 grit. It sheets out super flat. And what that'll do is it'll help the outgas of solvent, because it's only coming up. So, yeah, that's the thing. It's a long process. You're going to spend more on materials, but if you paint it with real clear, with shiny clear, sand it flat, and then all you have to think about is super tight technique, best distribution, temperatures. You don't have to wait 4 or 5 hours to do the whole paint job, but then you're flat clear. It just gives you a little bit more control back, a little bit more time control. Here's some stuff that has nothing to do with much. So, this is not technical advice. My post-it note says just stuff. So, at Daniel Luma 2948, how come you didn't paint the door jambs on Derek's white truck? I didn't have to. Derek did it at home. Next question. So I thank you for that. Why did you not try Derek's 1 grit on the truck? If you guys follow Vice Grip, he's got a demo on 1 grit sandpaper, and I have to admit, it wrinkled my brow when I looked at it. I had trouble breathing for about a minute or so after he showed that, and just the sound of it, I can't unsee it and I can't unhear it. So Derek, yeah, I'm not going to finish that sentence. So the reason I didn't try it is because I couldn't bring myself to it. If Wile E. Coyote had so much money to buy all of that stuff to catch the Roadrunner, why didn't he just buy his own dinner? Mark Mitchell 7812 said it was awesome, and I don't even paint. Well, thanks, man. That's great. All right, so this is one. This is something that it kind of warms my heart a little bit. Great stuff, KT. Your content has generated a great deal of excitement for myself to get started on projects. That's fantastic to hear. After watching the episode of Ice Grit Garage, I think it's safer to say that we all got smarter. Wow. And it didn't take that long. Thank you for your positive spin on something most of us lack confidence in. So we'll finish up with this. The reason that I can sit here in front of you and confidently give advice on procedures, materials, suggestions that I think are going to help you and make you better technicians, or at least change up the thought process, maybe unlearn some stuff, maybe introduce some new thought processes in between, is the fact that I have made every mistake. I have screwed up to the point where it's beyond humbling. It's ridiculous the amount of materials that I've wasted, the embarrassment I've had with customers bringing cars back, and the humility in which I've had to address things that I've done horribly wrong, sometimes over and over again. So at some point in this thick noggin, I've figured out how to troubleshoot my own mistakes. So that's the reason that I'm able to sit here and say with authority, here's how you fix that problem. Here's something to consider with that problem. It's not because I'm gifted with this stuff. It's because I've got acquired skill. It's because I've done it a lot of times, and people way smarter than me have told me to slow down and read my TDS sheets, have brought me into training classes, have suggested other training classes. This is such a wonderful industry. There's so much resource out there for you. I'm a tiny, tiny small part of that, and I'm so proud that I can help some people get better at what they do. That's the whole purpose of Paintucation. So it humbles me to say that you got smarter by watching the paint job than I did throwing some stuff out there. So thank you for that. Sincerely, it warms me up when you say stuff like that, and it inspires me to keep going. And I will keep going. This YouTube channel is going to grow. With your help, we're going to get more and more subscribers in here and funnel people towards the resources that I've got up on Paintucation.com. I've got 13 or 14 streaming programs. Some of them are as little as $5. I've got the Paintucation University course. I've got the DVDs. If you still watch DVDs, I've got a lot of free stuff on YouTube here. You're not paying for this free stuff. The way you can help me get this is helping me get people looking at this. We owe it to the next generation of people coming up to lend our expertise, to help them, give them a leg up, give them a mental hand up, and empowered and engaged in training and education. This trade is incredible. There's opportunity in collision repair, restoration that people aren't even talking about. And so it's my mission in life to get people excited about this stuff, to empower and to help people realize that this is a great career. It's a noble career. It's a very high-paying job. It's a very high-paying job. Look it up. Entry-level porter positions are way more than you would think in modern collision repair. So I want to say thank you for watching, for subscribing, for helping me spread the word about this channel, for writing in questions, because I didn't even get through with all of these, and I've got another stack of them over there. So the Q&A stuff, this is going to keep going. I will keep on answering your questions if you want me to. It's up to you. This channel is yours as much as it's mine. We've got some cool DIY projects coming in. I'll let the cat out of the bag a little bit. We're going to do a bed liner full paint job. We're going to do restoring or resurrecting a anodized aluminum grill. That's a kind of a hard one to fix, but I've got some cool techniques for that. We've got stuff coming up, some metalworking coming up, so please stay watching. If you're not subscribed, ring the bell, get the notifications, and let us come to you, and let's do this thing together, man. This is neat. This is fun. I've said it before. This is way more fun than television. So I want to say thank you. We'll see you on the next episode. And so I'm going to go home. It's time to lubricate. That sounded weird. It's time to hydrate. Hey, thanks for watching another episode of Question and Answer with Paintucation by Kevin Tetz. This is where you guys put a question in the comments and we'll take it up. I'll do the research and we'll get you the best answer we can. In the meantime, subscribe to this channel. If you're already subscribed, thank you, but tell your friends. See you next time.